Hey there, and welcome back to the Illuminated Shelf podcast, your go-to channel for inspirational self-help and spiritual book insights. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Peter. In each episode, we dive into the key insights, practical tips, and a little author background to guide you on your journey. Your support means the world to us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new episodes.
Ready to explore today's book topic? Let's get started. Welcome to a deep dive into the power of now. I have to admit, I found myself nodding along to so much of what Eckhart Tolle writes about. This book really does make you think differently about, well, pretty much everything.
It's true, the concepts in this book have a way of getting under your skin and making you question some fundamental assumptions about how we experience life.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to explore today. We'll unpack some of the key takeaways from The Power of Now, specifically focusing on how you can use these ideas to break free from those mental patterns that cause so much unnecessary suffering.
And you might be surprised to find that even though the ideas resonate with a lot of different spiritual traditions, there's no specific religious dogma here. It's really about universal truths that are applicable to anyone, regardless of their background.
That's what struck me too. It's not about subscribing to a specific belief system, but rather about exploring the nature of consciousness itself.
Okay, so let's dive right in. This book has had a profound impact on countless readers. People describe experiencing significant positive changes, even what some call miracles after reading it. What do you make of those kinds of stories?
It's fascinating, isn't it? Tolle's publisher in Canada shared some incredible anecdotes about readers who reported experiencing profound healing and personal transformation after immersing themselves in the book. What's particularly interesting is that many of these stories revolve around a sudden shift in perception, a kind of aha moment that leads to a more joyful and peaceful way of being.
That makes sense when you consider Eckhart Tolle's own journey. He went from a state of deep depression to a radical spiritual awakening almost overnight. That kind of intense personal experience must have heavily informed his writing, right? Absolutely. That raw authenticity shines through in his words. You can really feel the depth of his transformation and the genuine desire to help others access that same inner peace. In a way, his personal story serves as a living testament to the power of the present moment, which is the central theme of the book.
Right, and this idea that humanity hasn't reached its peak evolutionarily, as Michael Murphy suggests in the foreword, plays right into that theme. It suggests that we have the potential to evolve beyond our current state of consciousness and access higher levels of awareness.
I find that concept particularly intriguing. What if we're just scratching the surface of our potential as humans? What if there are entire realms of experience and understanding that we haven't even begun to explore? That's a powerful idea that aligns perfectly with Tolle's teachings about tapping into the power of now.
It is. Okay, so to understand this power, we need to unpack what Tolle calls the ego. He defines it as the mind's false sense of self, constantly seeking identification with external things like possessions, status, and beliefs. But how does that actually play out in our daily lives?
You might recognize this in your own experience. That constant voice in your head that's comparing, judging, and striving for something more. It's that feeling of never quite being enough, of always needing something outside of yourself to feel complete. The ego is like a master storyteller, crafting a narrative about who you are based on fleeting experiences, possessions, and achievements.
It's almost like the ego is obsessed with attaching itself to anything that gives it a sense of solidity, a sense of meanness. But what's the problem with that? Why is this false sense of self such a source of suffering?
The problem is that this insatiable need for external validation keeps us trapped in a cycle of wanting, striving, and never quite feeling fulfilled. The ego is always looking for the next thing to latch onto, the next accomplishment to boost its self-worth. And this keeps us from experiencing the richness and aliveness of the present moment, which is where true peace and joy reside, according to Tolle.
And this brings us to that mind-bending concept of psychological time. This is where things get really interesting for me. Tolle suggests that the ego keeps us bouncing between dwelling on the past and obsessing about the future, rarely allowing us to truly inhabit the present moment. Can you break that down a bit more for us?
Think about it this way. How often are you fully present in this moment, without your mind drifting to past regrets or future anxieties? The ego thrives on this mental time travel, keeping you caught in a loop of what was and what might be, preventing you from experiencing the fullness of now.
So we're living in this kind of self-created time warp, constantly missing out on the beauty and aliveness of the present because we're so caught up in our mental stories about the past and the future. But if the power truly lies in the now, How do we escape this time trap?
Tolle offers a powerful practice he calls observing the thinker. It's about becoming aware of your thoughts and emotions without judgment, creating space between you, the observer, and the constant chatter of your mind.
It reminds me of mindfulness practices becoming aware of our internal experience without getting swept away by the stories our minds create. But how does that actually loosen the ego's grip?
By simply observing your thoughts and emotions, you begin to disidentify from them. You realize that you are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness that is witnessing them. This detachment, this ability to step back and observe, is what allows you to start loosening the ego's grip and experiencing a state of presence.
That makes sense. It's like creating some breathing room between ourselves and the constant mental chatter so we can experience a deeper level of awareness. But what about those intense emotional reactions we all experience? It can feel like we're puppets to our emotions sometimes, completely at their mercy.
That's a common experience. But Tolle points out that emotions are essentially the body's reactions to the mind's thoughts. So by becoming a witness to our emotions just as we observe our thoughts, we can break free from their control.
Right, so you're saying we don't have to be slaves to our emotions, that we can actually choose how we respond to them.
Exactly. Instead of being consumed by anger, sadness, or fear, you can learn to observe those emotions without letting them dictate your actions. Imagine feeling a surge of anger. But instead of reacting impulsively, you pause. You observe the sensation of anger in your body. You acknowledge it without judgment, and then you choose how you want to respond. That's the power of presence.
That's a game changer, isn't it? But it sounds really hard. Like, how do we even begin to develop that kind of awareness and self-control? It can feel like our emotions just hijack us sometimes, especially when we're dealing with challenging situations.
It does take practice, but the first step is simply becoming aware. Tolle suggests regularly asking yourself, what's going on inside me right now?
That simple question can shift your focus inward, allowing you to become more attuned to your thoughts and feelings as they arise. And remember, it's not about suppressing or denying your emotions, but rather about creating a space between you and the emotion, so you can choose a more conscious response. Okay, I can see how that would be helpful, just taking that pause, that moment to check in with ourselves before reacting. But what about all the emotional baggage we carry from the past? It can feel like that past pain is always lurking in the background, ready to sabotage our happiness.
That's where Tolle's concept of the pain body comes in. It's essentially an accumulation of past emotional pain that can weigh us down and even sabotage our relationships. Imagine it as a shadow self, a dense energy field that thrives on negativity and drama.
So it's more than just memories. It's like this living, breathing entity that feeds on our negativity and keeps us stuck in old patterns of suffering.
Exactly. And the tricky thing about the pain body is that it doesn't want to be seen. It wants to remain hidden in the shadows, unconsciously influencing your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It can even drive you to recreate painful experiences from the past, as if it's trying to validate its existence.
So are you saying we're doomed to repeat our past mistakes because of this pain body? It can feel like that sometimes, like we're just puppets to these unconscious patterns. But if we have the power to disidentify from the ego, can we also disengage from the pain body?
That's the good news. Tolle emphasizes that we have the power to disidentify from our pain bodies as well. And it starts with awareness, with recognizing when the pain body is activated. We'll delve deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive.
This is fascinating. We've unpacked so much already. But if we want to break free from the mind's grip and this pain body, what's the key? What does it mean to access that state of no mind or pure consciousness that Tully talks about?
Essentially, it's about recognizing that you are not your thoughts. You are something much vaster, something Tolle calls pure consciousness or no mind. It's in this state of being beyond the limitations of the thinking mind that you can experience true freedom and joy. And we'll explore exactly how to do that in the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait to delve deeper into that. We've covered a lot of ground already, from the nature of the ego to the concept of psychological time and the intriguing idea of the pain body. It's amazing how these concepts all interweave to paint a picture of how we create our own suffering and what we can do to break free from those patterns.
You know, it's interesting how Tolle talks about the pain body, almost like it's a separate entity, this intense energy field, this almost parasitic being that feeds off our negativity and actually doesn't want us to see it for what it is.
Right. It's almost like it has a vested interest in keeping us stuck in a cycle of suffering. But how can we disengage from something that's operating on such a subconscious level that feels like sometimes we're just puppets to these unconscious patterns?
It can definitely feel that way. But remember, awareness is always the first step. Tolle suggests tuning into our bodies and noticing any sensations of heaviness, tension, or emotional discomfort. These physical manifestations can often be clues that the pain body is activated.
So we can literally feel it in our bodies. It's not just an abstract psychological concept.
Exactly. It might manifest as a tightness in the chest, a knot in the stomach, or even a pervasive sense of unease. That feeling of just not being quite right, even if you can't pinpoint exactly why.
Okay, I think we've all felt that at some point. But let's say we've identified these sensations. What's the next step? Do we try to fight, push it away? That's what our instinct might tell us to do, right?
That's a natural reaction.
Hmm?
But Tolle cautions against resisting the pain body. He says that resistance only strengthens it. It's like wrestling with a shadow. You can't win.
That makes sense. It's like when you try not to think about something, it just pops up in your mind even more. So instead of fighting the pain body, what does Tolle suggest we do?
He encourages us to become a witness to it, to simply observe it without judgment or analysis. Remember that principle of detachment we were talking about earlier? The one that helps us disidentify from the ego. It's very similar here.
So it's about creating that space between us and the pain body, so we can start to break its hold over us. And in doing so, we can access the power of the present moment and begin to heal those old wounds.
Exactly. Tolle also gives some practical advice on how we can navigate the ups and downs of life without getting sucked into negativity or drama. It's all about cultivating a sense of presence in our everyday lives.
Okay, let's hear it. What's the secret to bringing more presence into our daily lives?
Well, he suggests paying attention to simple things, the sensations of breathing, the feeling of your feet on the ground, the sights and sounds around you. It's about grounding yourself in the physical reality of the present moment.
It sounds like a way of anchoring ourselves so we don't get swept away by that mental chatter. But what about those mental patterns that create anxiety and unhappiness? Like constantly replaying past mistakes or worrying about what might happen in the future.
Yes, those are classic ego traps.
Mhm.
Tolle emphasizes the importance of disengaging from those patterns. Dwelling on the past, worrying about the future, complaining about your current circumstances, these mental habits just drain your energy and keep you stuck in a cycle of suffering.
He also talks about what he calls the waiting game, right? That tendency to put our lives on hold until some future event happens, like, I'll be happy when.
Yes, he calls this waiting on a grand scale. It's that belief that we'll finally be happy when we get that dream job, find the perfect partner, or achieve some external goal. But the problem is, that day never seems to arrive.
And even when we do achieve those things, the ego quickly finds a new target, a new source of dissatisfaction.
Right. So we end up chasing a moving target, always seeking fulfillment outside ourselves. Tolle challenges us to find contentment in the present moment. Regardless of our external circumstances, it's about shifting our focus from having to being.
I love that. Shifting from having to being, that's a powerful distinction. But I'm curious about how all of this plays out in our relationships with others. Surely our interactions with people can be a source of stress and conflict, even when we're trying to be present.
Absolutely. But Tolle believes relationships can also serve as catalysts for spiritual growth. They can be powerful mirrors, reflecting back to us our need for greater presence and awareness.
So it's not about finding perfect relationships, but about using those relationships to help us evolve and become more conscious.
Exactly. Think about it. When do you become most aware of your own ego's defenses, your own unconscious patterns? It's often in those moments of friction with others, right? Relationships have a way of pushing our buttons and exposing our blind spots.
That's so true. But Tolle also has some pretty unconventional views on love and relationships, doesn't he? He warns against confusing love with ego-driven attachment and neediness.
Yes, he does. He's really challenging that whole you complete me idea. It's so prevalent in our culture. He argues that when we seek completion in another person, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment and heartache.
Because no one can fulfill all our needs or live up to our idealized expectations. And when those expectations aren't met, the ego's defenses kick in, leading to conflict, blame, and resentment.
Exactly. So what's the alternative? What does a healthy, conscious relationship look like, according to Tolle? Well, he emphasizes the importance of approaching relationships from a place of presence and awareness. He says that when we're fully present with our partners, we can connect on a deeper level. That transcends the ego's need for control and validation.
So it's about bringing that same mindfulness and presence that we cultivate in our individual lives into our relationships. But it sounds like it takes a lot of self-awareness and emotional maturity to build that kind of connection.
It does, but the rewards are immense. Tolle suggests that when two people come together from a place of presence, their relationship can become a powerful vehicle for spiritual growth and transformation.
It's beautiful to think about. Instead of seeking fulfillment from our partners, we can support each other's journey toward wholeness. But let's be honest, most of us operate from a place of ego at least some of the time, which can create challenges in relationships.
Of course, no one is perfectly present all the time, but Tolle offers some valuable insights on how to navigate these challenges with grace and awareness. He talks about the importance of disengaging from the ego's reactive patterns. So instead of getting caught up in arguments or trying to control our partners, we can choose to observe our reactions without judgment and create space for understanding and compassion.
It's like taking a step back from the emotional battlefield
Yeah.
and choosing a different kind of engagement.
Yes, and he emphasizes the importance of taking responsibility for our own thoughts and emotions. Rather than blaming our partners for our unhappiness, it's about owning our stuff and not projecting it onto the other person.
That's so important, but not always easy to do in the heat of the moment. I remember reading about Tolle's perspective on forgiveness and how it's not about condoning hurtful behavior, but about freeing ourselves from the pain of the past.
It's a powerful distinction. He sees forgiveness not as condoning or excusing what someone did, but as a conscious choice to release the energetic burden of resentment and anger that we carry within ourselves. When we hold on to past hurts,
So it's about breaking free from those chains of the past so we can move forward with more peace and clarity. But I imagine forgiveness can be a challenging process, especially when we've been deeply hurt. It can feel almost impossible to let go of that anger and resentment.
it can be incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
But remember, forgiveness is a process, not a one-time event. Tolle suggests approaching it as a practice, a gradual process of releasing the pain and choosing to see the situation and the person who hurt us with greater compassion and understanding.
It's like choosing to see things from a more expansive perspective, a view that allows for healing and transformation. But does Tolle believe we can achieve this kind of forgiveness on our own? Or do we need the other person's participation?
That's a great question. Tolle emphasizes that true forgiveness doesn't require the other person to apologize or even acknowledge the harm they caused. It's an internal process, a shift in our own perception, and a conscious choice to release the negativity that's poisoning our own hearts and minds.
That's incredibly freeing, isn't it? It means we don't have to wait for someone else to change or apologize in order to find peace within ourselves.
Exactly. Forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. And it doesn't mean condoning the behavior or pretending it didn't happen. It's about choosing to release the grip that the past has on us so we can move forward with more lightness and freedom.
Okay, so we've talked about how the pain body can sabotage our relationships and how forgiveness can be a powerful antidote to that negativity. But does Tolle believe that all conflict in relationships is bad? Or does he see some value in those moments of friction?
That's a really interesting point. Tolle doesn't shy away from the reality of conflict in relationships. In fact, he sees conflict as an opportunity for growth. He suggests that when conflicts arise, we can use them to become more aware of our unconscious patterns and ego defenses. It's about using those moments of friction to learn and evolve.
So it's about shifting our perspective from seeing conflict as something to be avoided at all costs, to seeing it as a potential catalyst for growth and deeper understanding.
Exactly. It's not about denying the conflict or pretending it's not there. It's about approaching those challenging moments with awareness and curiosity. Asking ourselves, what can I learn from this? What is this conflict revealing about myself, about my partner, about our dynamic?
That's a much more empowering approach than just getting swept up in the emotional drama. But how do we actually do that? How do we have those difficult conversations without resorting to blame or attack? It sounds like a delicate balancing act.
It is, but Tolle emphasizes the importance of communicating our needs and boundaries clearly and respectfully. Without resorting to blame or attack, it's about finding that balance between asserting ourselves and honoring the other person's perspective. And it's not always easy, but with practice, it's possible to navigate even the most difficult conversations with awareness and compassion.
It sounds like a lot of what Tolle is teaching is about cultivating that presence, awareness, and conscious choice, not just in our relationships, but in all aspects of our lives.
You're absolutely right. These core principles are woven into the fabric of Tolle's teachings. And, I think a concept that really embodies this is his idea of surrender. It seems like such a radical idea, almost counterintuitive, in a culture that values control and self-reliance.
I agree. It's definitely not a message you hear very often. But Tolle presents surrender not as a passive resignation, but as a powerful act of aligning with the flow of life.
Exactly. It's about letting go of a struggle, letting go of that constant need to control everything. It's about trusting that things are unfolding as they should, even when it feels uncomfortable or uncertain.
It reminds me of that analogy of floating down a river. Instead of fighting against the current, we can surrender to the flow and allow ourselves to be carried to our destination.
That's a beautiful analogy. And it's important to note that Tolle isn't suggesting that surrender means giving up on our goals or dreams. It's not about becoming passive or apathetic.
So it's not about giving up, but about giving over to something greater than ourselves.
Precisely. He clarifies that surrender is about releasing the ego's need to control outcomes and trusting that a higher intelligence is at work, guiding us toward our highest good. It's about relinquishing control to something bigger than ourselves, something beyond our limited understanding.
And when we do that, when we truly surrender, what happens?
Tolle emphasizes that when we surrender, we open ourselves to a level of grace and ease. That's unavailable when we're clinging to our limited perspectives and desires. We tap into a flow of energy that's much greater than our individual efforts.
It's like we're aligning ourselves with the natural rhythm of life, rather than trying to force things to go our way. But what about suffering? It's something we all experience at some point in our lives. Does Tolle believe that surrender means simply accepting suffering passively? Or does he offer a way to transform that suffering?
That's where his teachings get really profound. He suggests that suffering arises when we resist the present moment, when we fight against the natural flow of life. Our resistance is what creates the suffering.
So you're saying that while pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, that we actually have a choice in how we experience pain.
Exactly. Tolle emphasizes that we can choose to surrender to the present moment, even in the midst of pain, and allow it to move through us without creating additional layers of suffering.
That sounds incredibly challenging. It seems like it would take tremendous courage and resilience to face pain in that way, to not try to escape from it or numb ourselves to it.
It does. But Tolle believes that this is the path to true freedom and liberation. Instead of seeing suffering as something to be avoided at all costs, he sees it as a potential doorway to greater awareness and spiritual awakening.
So instead of trying to escape from pain, we can actually use it as a catalyst for growth and transformation. But how do we actually do that? It sounds incredibly difficult to embrace pain in that way.
It's not easy, that's for sure. But Tolle offers some practical guidance on how to navigate those challenging moments. He talks about the importance of becoming fully present with our pain, of allowing ourselves to feel it without judgment or resistance. It's about leaning into the discomfort instead of trying to push it away.
It's about surrendering to the experience even when it's painful, and trusting that there's something valuable to be gained from that surrender.
Exactly. And he emphasizes the power of acceptance,
Oh.
accepting that this pain is a part of our present moment experience, and that it too shall pass. It's about trusting the process even when it's painful, and knowing that nothing lasts forever.
He also uses the metaphor of the crucifixion to represent the death of the ego and the pain body, right?
He does. It's a powerful image, isn't it?
Ah,
He's suggesting that by surrendering to the present moment, even in our darkest hours, we could experience a kind of ego death that paves the way for spiritual transformation. It's like a symbolic death and rebirth.
so through surrender, we can actually transform suffering into a profound experience of peace and acceptance. It sounds like Tolle is pointing to a state of consciousness that goes beyond the ego's limited perspective. Can you talk a bit about what he means by spiritual awakening?
That's a great question. Tolle's view of spiritual awakening is rooted in the realization that we are not our thoughts or emotions. We are something much vaster, something he calls pure consciousness, or being.
It sounds like he's talking about a shift in identity, a move from seeing ourselves as separate individuals to recognizing our interconnectedness with all of life.
You've got it. He suggests that this awakening involves a profound shift from the ego's limited perspective to a more expansive awareness that encompasses the unity of all things. It's about transcending the illusion of separation and experiencing ourselves as part of a greater whole.
And this awakening isn't some distant goal reserved for spiritual masters or mystics, right?
Exactly. He emphasizes that it's a possibility available to each of us in every moment. It's about waking up to the reality of who we truly are, beyond the confines of our limited minds and egos. And he suggests that this awakening naturally leads to a deeper sense of peace, joy, and compassion.
So it's not just about personal enlightenment, but about a transformation that ripples outward, affecting our relationships and our engagement with the world.
Precisely. And remember, Tolle doesn't offer a specific roadmap for achieving spiritual awakening. He emphasizes that it's not something we can force or achieve through effort. It's more about surrendering to what is dissolving the ego's grip and allowing ourselves to be fully present in each moment.
It's about letting go and allowing the truth of who we are to reveal itself.
Yes. And he points out that this awakening is a journey, not a destination. It's an ongoing process of deepening our awareness and aligning with the present moment. It's about continuously waking up to the reality of our true nature.
You mentioned earlier that Tolle sees action as an important aspect of living a conscious life. Can you talk a bit about what he means by conscious action?
Of course. Tolle emphasizes that conscious action arises from a place of presence and alignment with the present moment. It's about acting from a place of inner knowing, rather than reacting impulsively or out of habit. It's about bringing awareness to our choices and actions.
So it's about pausing before we act, checking in with ourselves, and making sure our actions are aligned with our values and intentions.
Exactly. And he suggests that when we act from a place of presence, our actions naturally align with our highest good and the good of the whole. It's like we tap into a source of wisdom and guidance that goes beyond our limited thinking minds.
But how do we know what our highest good is? Sometimes it feels like there are so many conflicting desires and priorities, pulling us in different directions.
That's where that practice of observing the thinker comes in handy. By creating that space between you and your thoughts, you can start to discern which thoughts are coming from the ego and which are coming from a deeper place of wisdom and intuition.
So it's about learning to trust that inner voice, that gut feeling that tells us what's truly aligned with our purpose.
Exactly. And Tolle also emphasizes the importance of letting go of attachment to outcomes. It's not about forcing things to happen, but about taking inspired action and trusting the process. He encourages us to act with intention, but to release our grip on how things should be and allow life to unfold naturally.
It's about surrendering to the mystery of the journey and trusting that the universe will support us along the way.
Beautifully said. And he suggests that when we act from this place of surrender and trust, we experience a sense of flow and ease that's unavailable when we're trying to control outcomes. It's about aligning with the natural rhythm of life and allowing things to unfold effortlessly.
It's a beautiful vision, but it can be hard to trust that process when we're in the midst of challenges or uncertainty.
It can be incredibly challenging. But remember, trust is a muscle that grows stronger with use. The more we practice surrendering to the present moment and taking inspired action, the more we build that trust in ourselves and in the unfolding of life.
Okay, so we've talked about conscious action, but I'm curious about how all of this relates to finding joy in the present moment. Tolle seems to be suggesting that true happiness isn't something we pursue in the future, but something we can experience right now, regardless of our circumstances.
That's a radical idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
He challenges us to shift our focus from seeking happiness in external achievements or possessions to finding it in the simple act of being present.
So it's about appreciating the beauty and wonder that's already present in our lives, rather than chasing after something that always seems to be just out of reach.
Exactly. He suggests that joy is an inherent quality of our being, something that's always available to us when we quiet the mind and connect with the present moment.
It's like we're already swimming in an ocean of joy, but we're too busy splashing around on the surface to notice.
I love that. It's a perfect analogy. He encourages us to dive deep within ourselves and connect with the source of joy that resides at the core of our being.
So how do we access this inner wellspring of joy? What are some practical steps we can take to cultivate more joy in our lives?
Well, Tolle suggests that practices like meditation, mindfulness, and spending time in nature can help us quiet the mind and connect with the present moment.
It's about creating space for stillness and allowing the joy to bubble up from within, not trying to force it, but simply creating the conditions for it to emerge.
Exactly. And he emphasizes the importance of cultivating gratitude for the simple things in life, like the breath, the sunshine, the love of those around us. It's about appreciating the abundance that's already present in our lives, rather than focusing on what we lack. He also suggests that by shifting our focus from wanting to appreciating, we naturally open ourselves to a greater experience of joy.
So it's about finding contentment in what is. Rather than constantly seeking more, it's about recognizing the inherent richness and beauty of the present moment, even when things aren't perfect.
You've got it. And I think this relates to his teachings on transcending duality. Remember how we talked about how the ego's tendency to divide the world into good and bad, right and wrong, creates so much suffering? Well, Tolle encourages us to move beyond this dualistic thinking by recognizing the interconnectedness of all things.
So it's about seeing the unity beneath the apparent differences, seeing the wholeness of life, rather than getting caught up in those rigid categories.
Yes. He suggests that when we transcend duality, we open ourselves to a deeper level of acceptance and compassion, both for ourselves and for others. It's like we're expanding our capacity to hold the complexity of life without judgment or resistance.
It's about embracing the full spectrum of human experience, the light and the shadow, the joy and the sorrow, without getting caught up in those polarized opposites.
Beautifully said. And he emphasizes that this acceptance, this willingness to embrace the wholeness of life, is the key to finding true peace and happiness.
Because when we let go of the need to control, judge, and separate, we're free to experience the joy and beauty that's inherent in every moment, no matter what form it takes.
Exactly. And I think this ties into his perspective on the nature of time. Remember how we talked about how he challenges the idea of time as linear and sequential, suggesting that our perception of time is actually an illusion.
Right. It was mind-blowing to think about how the past and the future only exist in our minds.
He points out that the past and the future are mental constructs that we create based on our memories and expectations. The only reality is the present moment.
But doesn't that make planning for the future or learning from the past pointless?
Not at all. Tolle isn't saying that we should ignore the past or disregard the future. He's simply pointing out that we don't need to be imprisoned by them.
So it's about finding that balance between acknowledging the past and the future without getting so caught up in them that we miss out on the present moment.
Exactly. He suggests that time is an illusion. That keeps us trapped in a cycle of wanting, fearing, and striving because we're constantly projecting ourselves into the past or the future, missing out on the richness of the present moment. He encourages us to break free from this illusion by becoming fully present in the now, by experiencing the fullness of life as it unfolds in this very moment.
It's about shifting our focus from the mental realm of time to the experiential reality of the present. But how do we do that? How do we stop our minds from constantly jumping back and forth between the past and the future?
It takes practice, but the more we cultivate presence in our daily lives, the easier it becomes. Remember those techniques we talked about earlier? Paying attention to our breath, noticing the sensations in our bodies, grounding ourselves in the physical world. These are all ways to anchor ourselves in the present moment.
It's like training our minds to come back to the here and now over and over again.
Exactly. And Tolle emphasizes that when we do that, we access a level of peace and freedom that's unavailable when we're trapped in the time warp of the mind. It's like stepping out of the hamster wheel of our thoughts and into the vastness of the present moment.
It sounds incredibly liberating, but I'm still struggling with this idea that suffering can lead to spiritual awakening. It seems counterintuitive that pain could lead to greater awareness and enlightenment.
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it? But Tolle suggests that suffering can actually be a catalyst for spiritual growth.
But how is that possible? How can something so painful and difficult lead to something so positive and transformative?
Well, he explains that when we're faced with pain and adversity, we're forced to confront the limitations of our egoic identities. It's like our suffering cracks open the shell of our illusions and forces us to look deeper.
So it's like suffering becomes a crucible for transformation, forcing us to question our assumptions about ourselves and the world.
Exactly. He suggests that this process can be painful, but it ultimately leads to greater awareness and a deeper connection with our true nature. And it's important to note that it's not the suffering itself that leads to awakening, but our willingness to embrace it, to surrender to the present moment, even in the midst of pain.
So it's about using our suffering as a springboard for growth and transformation, rather than letting it define us or defeat us.
Precisely. And remember, Tolle also emphasizes the importance of forgiveness in healing from past wounds and moving forward with greater peace and clarity.
Right. He sees forgiveness as an essential step in releasing the grip of the pain body and opening ourselves to greater peace and healing. But as we talked about before, forgiveness can be a tricky concept. It's often misunderstood as condoning or excusing harmful behavior.
That's a common misconception. But Tolle clarifies that forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook or denying the harm they've caused. It's not about saying what they did was okay. It's about freeing ourselves from the pain of the past, not about condoning the actions of the person who hurt us.
So it's about releasing the energetic burden of resentment and anger that we carry within ourselves when we hold on to past hurts.
Exactly. He emphasizes that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves, not something we do for the other person.
It's about choosing to let go of the negativity that's poisoning our own hearts and minds.
Precisely. And remember, forgiveness can be a challenging process, especially when we've been deeply hurt. It's not always easy to let go of anger and resentment. But Tolle suggests that we can approach forgiveness as a practice, a gradual process of releasing the pain and choosing to see the situation and the person who hurt us with greater compassion and understanding.
It's about cultivating a different perspective, a more expansive view that allows for healing and transformation.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that true forgiveness leads to a profound sense of inner peace and liberation. It's like breaking free from the chains of the past and stepping into a more spacious, joyful way of being.
And that, in essence, is what Tolle means by transforming suffering into peace.
Beautifully said. You know, I'm struck by how interconnected all of Tolle's teachings are. They all point back to this core idea of presence, of waking up to the reality of the present moment and the power that lies within it.
It's true. It's like all of these concepts, the ego, the pain body, surrender, forgiveness, joy, are all different facets of the same jewel. They're all interconnected and reinforce each other.
Yes. And ultimately, they all point to a path of greater freedom and liberation, a path of moving beyond the limitations of the ego and stepping into the fullness of who we truly are.
It's an inspiring message. But I'm curious about how all of this applies to our daily lives. It's one thing to grasp these concepts intellectually, but it's another to actually integrate them into our experience.
That's a great point. Toy emphasizes that living in the present moment isn't just a philosophy, it's a practice.
So it's not just about reading the book or understanding the ideas, it's about putting them into action in our everyday lives.
Exactly. It's about bringing awareness to our everyday activities,
Mm.
noticing the sensations in our bodies, and paying attention to the thoughts and emotions that arise.
So it's about integrating mindfulness into the fabric of our lives, finding moments of stillness and awareness, even in the midst of our busy schedules.
Precisely. He suggests that we can practice presence while doing everyday things like washing the dishes,
Hmm.
walking the dog, or having a conversation. It's about finding those moments of presence no matter what we're doing.
And it's not about becoming some kind of Zen master who's detached from the world. It's about bringing that awareness into the messiness and beauty of everyday life.
Yes, and remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress, not perfection. Every time you notice your mind wandering, gently bring it back to the present moment.
It's like training a puppy. You just keep redirecting its attention over and over again.
Exactly. And with practice, it becomes more natural and effortless.
And remember, it's not just about being present. It's also about cultivating gratitude for the simple things in life, to savor the beauty of nature, and to connect with the people we love.
It's about appreciating the richness of our experience, even in the midst of challenges. And it's about recognizing that even the mundane moments, the everyday tasks, can be opportunities for presence and joy.
You know, that really resonates with me. It's easy to get caught up in that bigger, better, faster mentality, always striving for the next thing. But there's so much beauty in the simplicity of just being. But I think what can be challenging is that constant chatter in our heads. It can be hard to stay present when that inner critic is always judging us or comparing us to others.
That's where that practice of disidentifying from the ego comes in. Tolle reminds us that that voice in our heads, the one that's always chattering, judging, and comparing, isn't who we truly are.
But if it's not who we are, then who is it? And how do we separate ourselves from that constant stream of thoughts?
He suggests we can practice noticing those thoughts and beliefs without getting caught up in them. Imagine watching clouds drift by in the sky. You can observe them without getting attached or believing they are you.
That's a great analogy. It makes it seem less intimidating, less like we have to wrestle those thoughts to the ground. We can simply acknowledge them and let them float on by.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that the more we practice this disidentification, the more we access the peace and freedom of our true nature. We start to see those thoughts as just thoughts, not as truths about ourselves.
So we're shifting our identity from the limited self of the ego to the vastness of pure consciousness. But if we're not our thoughts, if we're not our emotions, who are we? What is this true nature that Tolle keeps referring to?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that Tolle encourages us to explore for ourselves. He offers some pointers, of course. But ultimately, it's a journey of self-discovery that unfolds through direct experience, through cultivating that presence and awareness in our own lives.
And it's a journey that requires a lot of surrender, wouldn't you say? Surrender seems to be a recurring theme in Tolle's teachings. Surrender to the present moment, surrender to what is, surrender to the flow of life.
Yes, surrender is essential. He suggests that surrender isn't about giving up or becoming passive, but about letting go of the ego's need to control and trusting that a higher intelligence is at work. It's about relinquishing control and embracing the mystery of the unfolding present moment.
It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers, that we don't need to micromanage every aspect of our lives. It's about trusting in something bigger than ourselves, a force that's guiding us toward our highest good, even when we can't see the path ahead.
That's beautifully put. And you know it can be challenging to surrender, especially when we're facing difficult circumstances or when we're used to being in control. But as we've discussed throughout this deep dive, it's in that surrender that we open ourselves to a level of grace and ease that's unavailable when we're clinging to our limited perspectives and desires.
It's like we're finally able to relax, to let go of the struggle, and to allow life to unfold naturally, knowing that we're held and supported by something much greater than ourselves.
Yes. And Tolle suggests that this surrender is the key to transforming suffering into peace and acceptance. It's about recognizing that even in the midst of pain, there's a deeper reality, a ground of being that's untouched by the ups and downs of life.
So it's not about denying the pain or pretending it's not there. It's about finding that place of peace within ourselves. Even in the midst of difficult circumstances, it's about recognizing that we are more than our pain, more than our suffering.
Beautifully said. And I think what's so powerful about Tolle's teachings is that he doesn't just offer these concepts as abstract ideas. He provides practical tools and techniques that we can use to cultivate presence awareness and surrender in our daily lives.
Right. He gives us those concrete practices to work with, like observing the thinker, disidentifying from the ego, cultivating gratitude, and practicing forgiveness. It's not just about reading the book and saying, oh, that's nice. It's about actually doing the work, putting these ideas into action, and seeing how they transform our experience.
Exactly. It's a path of transformation that requires effort and commitment, but the rewards are immeasurable.
And it's a journey that we can embark on right now in this very moment. We don't have to wait for some future event or some special circumstance. The power of now is always available to us no matter where we are or what we're doing.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? The present moment is always here waiting to be embraced. And the more we cultivate presence in our lives, the more we tap into that power, that source of peace, joy, and freedom that's always been within us.
It's been an amazing journey exploring these ideas with you. So much to reflect on, so much to put into practice.
It's been a pleasure sharing this deep dive with you. I hope you'll continue to explore these concepts and discover the transformative power of the present moment in your own life.
Me too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the power of now. Until next time, may you find peace and joy in the present moment. Thanks for joining us on the Illuminated Shelf podcast.
If you found our discussion helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who could use a dose of inspiration.
And remember, keep reading, keep growing, and we'll see you next time.